All right, Clint from the doorway too, hanging out with John from Stomach, man. It's a pleasure getting to do this with you. Really, really is. I'm glad we got to talk. You got one of my favorite records of the year going on right now, so I just want to let you know that. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the band, how it kind of came to be? I know it hasn't been around too long, but like I said, why don't you give us a little history of the band first of all?
All right, sounds good. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on here. Appreciate it.
Go, go.
And also, I'm psyched that you love the record so much. That's obviously a great way to start. But yeah, so Stomach started, I want to say, sometime in like 2020.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would be fair to say. It was like not exactly like a pandemic project, like a lot of things started it like that way. I don't think I would reduce it to that necessarily. It was something that had been on my mind and building for quite some time. I already had some of this
Mm,
stuff written at the time the pandemic started, but I will say that that's kind of like when I started playing guitar more,
mm,
um, and like just kind of like getting it in motion. I would say so. Yeah, it's kind of dates back to then, and it started out as just me. Totally like a total solo project, kind of like an evolution of my previous band Ledge,
mm-hmm.
which was like kind of like the post Weekend Nachos project, which was if anybody doesn't know, like Weekend Nachos was the band that I did for a long
Yeah,
time that was like kind of a bit more like more well known and like successful for its time.
sure.
So yeah, that was just like real fast, like hardcore power violence, grindcore type stuff, and lots of like doom sludge influence with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of evolved into Ledge, which was eh, kind of like a vision that I hadn't really fully realized at any
Mm-hmm.
time, in my opinion. It was just kind of like I look back on it now as kind of like a stepping stone to get to where I'm at now with Stomach. Um, that project was more like kind of crowbar, sort of like almost like a like tough guy hardcore meets like
Sure.
doom influence, sort of. Um, and then that kind of evolved into something that I consider to be more of like where I was headed. It's something that was more traditional, like doom influence, like Earth and Sun kind of, um, just like that kind of avant-garde, like ambient kind of sludge sound. And yeah, I started writing shit like that. Stuff that was just a lot darker, a lot less hardcore influenced. Threw in some power violence influence there too, just for good measure. I don't think I'll ever get away from the fast
Sure.
parts. Um, but yeah, that's just kind of how it started. I wrote like a 4-song demo, recorded it in my basement. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of like what more to say about how it began, but that's
No,
basically
that's a good place to start. I appreciate
yeah.
it. Um, cool. So I'm going to talk a lot about Parasite because I haven't heard anything else besides that. So like
Okay.
that's kind of where we're going to be. Now I've heard your other bands, Weekend Nachos, Ledge. I've heard all that stuff before, and I was a fan of those bands. So when I saw that you were doing this, it piqued my interest before I even heard it. So like I was like, all right, let's see what this crazy son of a bitch is actually going to do with this one. So
Yeah.
so the first thoughts that came to mind after hearing Parasite was this is the most ugly, oppressive record that I have ever heard in my life. And how the hell did this happen with just two guys? Like, I don't know how it could be this monstrous sounding. So, kind of talk to me, like, how did that sound come to be? Like, did you have to layer tons of guitars? Was it just a live session it happened? Like, kind of talk about how it happened and how Parasite came to be.
I will. So I will say I could lie and just say like, oh yeah, it's just me and one dude, and we recorded it live, and it sounds like that. Like that would obviously make it far more unbelievable. But no, the truth is that the whole record was recorded just by me, in my basement, and there are not a ton of guitar, like layered guitar tracks,
Mhm.
but a considerable amount, like pretty standard, honestly, from like any other times I've recorded, with like a full band. Like two different tones, a left and a right, nothing too insane there, but definitely more than one guitar going
Yeah.
on the recording. And to be honest, like there's also one thing I will say that it is layered for sure is
Yeah.
like the noise that you hear in the background. So if you listen, I mean, maybe it's obvious, maybe it's not to all listeners, but if you listen kind of carefully, you can hear that there's like tons of feedback tracks just
Oh
go
yeah.
like at all times, basically. Like even no matter what you can hear, it's just like a continuous track of that going the whole time. So I remember the day that I actually set aside to do specifically the noise and feedback tracks. I remember I came up after like a few hours of doing that. And my wife was like, "What the fuck are you even doing down there?" Like she's like, "You're not even actually playing any songs. Like are you just feeding back?" And I was just like, yeah, that's what I'm doing today. That's it. Um, so yeah, it does. I'm happy to hear that that you say it sounds like monstrous because I wanted that,
Good, good.
but yeah, it is definitely like, all me just kind of like fine tuning that and making sure that the layers like it that goes into it. But yeah, I'm happy to say it's not like there's like 75 guitar tracks on there,
Gotcha.
so it's all just Sun products and Yamaha products at play here, and they make good shit.
Yeah, cool. No, awesome. So yeah, I didn't think I was crazy when I was asking about the layering because I could tell there was a lot of different textures going on it. Um, so that comes into play of the kind of the next question, like the denseness of this record. Like that's I think what drew me to it and like why I listened to it over and over again is it's not just a ton of guitars, it's the different layers and the different tones, and it literally sounds like an army of different sounds that are kind of happening. uh there's two bands. I didn't look at your press kit because I hate doing that before I talk to a band. Like just to like to talk to the band about what I hear, what I love, that kind of stuff. So there's two bands in particular that are, I would say, kins to what you guys do, what you're doing. First one is, and I've seen them live and I've heard them on record, and it's Primitive Man. Like,
Oh yeah.
you sound more like live Primitive Man than live Primitive Man does sometimes on record. Like, I'm just gonna be like really on. And then the other band, which is one of my all-time, I'm 51, so I'm not a kid. I've been around for quite some time. I've been playing doom music since the 90s too. But Grief is the other band.
Oh my
Like,
God.
all
Yeah.
right, like Terry's guitar tone and your guitar tone, I swear you were like, okay, do I need to tweak the amp this way to make it sound a little bit more like Grief? Like those are the two bands that I hear. I just wanted to see if they like were influences, if they're not influences, things like that.
So naturally, I think that like Primitive Man's presence, like just in my life, kind of like
Sure.
I feel like that band is like it's like if you started like using a really dangerous drug or something, like just being exposed to a band like that, like knowing them, seeing them live. I mean, like Weekend Nachos went on tour with them and
Yep.
they're friends of ours, but like just having that band in your life is gonna like draw you towards some sort of hell, like
Yep.
so I think that like that's like a Primitive Man, I won't deny, is like a huge influence on just like my approach when it comes to
Sure.
like sludge and doom, just because like I mean fuck, like Primitive Man hasn't even been around that long if you think about it,
Oh, I know.
and they just kind of like instantly make they instantly have this effect on the scene. You know what I mean? It's like
Yep.
they're a very important band. Like they're a very like their presence is just it's toxic.
Oh, I
You know?
agree.
And then as for Grief, Grief is my arguably my favorite band.
Nice.
So, you know, Dismal and Come to Grief
Mm,
are like two records that are just like there is no stomach without them. Um,
nice.
Now, you could say there's no stomach without Earth or Sun
Yeah.
or Noothgrush or Cavity or Floor, Um, but Grief is like they're like my minor threat,
Good,
basically.
good, good. Yeah.
Like I I absolutely fucking love that band. Like
That's awesome.
that band like means so much to me, and I feel like if there was ever a band that I just like dreamt about, it's like Grief, you know. Um, and honestly, I've been influenced by Grief like with all of this music that I've written, but I will say that with specifically Parasite,
Yeah.
I I feel like my attempt to kind of like do my own version of like either the Dismal EP or their first album, Come to Grief. Like this is like kind of like my attempt to like it's my first album, like my first full length.
Yeah.
I had two demos prior to that, um, which I think you would love them. Honestly, I think you should check those out
I
too,
will.
because that's kind of like those are a little bit more ambient at times. But like Parasite was my attempt to kind of recreate Come to Grief, basically. Like
Nice.
have my first like full length of Doom and Sludge and just like make a statement like that album does. To be
Yeah.
honest, all the way down to like the way the album even looks. Like if you look at the cover art for Parasite, it's kind of got like I would say I Hate God, Dope Sick was like an influence on like the way that the imagery comes across. And then also just like the the straightforwardness of it also has kind of like a Grief dismal
Yeah.
feel to it. The artwork doesn't really look like the artwork of Come to Grief because that who knows what's going on with the album
Right.
art.
Right.
But yeah, that just you could kind of get like that vibe.
Cool.
And I'm happy to see that that influence speaks when you say
Oh,
that.
it does. So I moved to Providence, Rhode Island in the 90s. And I used to go see Grief so much in Boston. It wasn't even funny. So like just hearing the record brings me back to a time when like I would go to the Middle East and they'd play in front of like 7 people, but it'd be the most fanatic 7 people that like would ever go see them live.
Dude,
So
I'm fucking jealous, man. Like, I mean, I would say I probably got into Grief in like maybe the early 2000s.
Mhm.
So like right around the time when Weekend Nachos was starting, like
Sure.
our drummer Adam, who actually is the guitarist to Stomach,
Yeah.
now, he kind of got me into bands like I Hate God and Grief and shit like that. And
Yeah.
that's kind of like where I first started hearing bands like Nuthgrush and um so yeah, I've been listening to Grief for quite some time, but it's taken years for that, like their influence to kind of
Sure.
come across fully in my music, you know?
Cool.
So
And you kind of stole the thunder from me because I was going to talk about your vocal presentation next, and you threw 3 of the bands that I was going to talk to and say, "Hey, are they influences to you?" So it's almost not worth it, but I'm going to talk about it anyway.
go
Uh,
for it.
yeah, the first one was like "I Hate God," the next one was "Nuthgrush," and then the other one was "Cavity." I swear to God, your vocals sound so much like early Cavity. It's just disgusting. Like, uh, you know, uh, early days, like when they were just pressing their own 7 inches and they were pressing their own vinyl themselves and stuff
Yep.
like that. Um, did you try and bring that more kind of hardcore vocal element into this style? Because that's what I love about like Nuthgrush and Cavity is they throw that like DIY hardcore element into the vocals with the doom. So
Totally. Like I
okay,
mean, like nail on the head,
okay,
like I come from like hardcore punk. So
mhm,
I would say that there's like always going to be that element there. I think like for me the issue was that Ledge was kind of coming too soon after Weekend Nachos. So
mhm,
there was like this desire to kind of have this like almost New York hardcore influence on like Doom, And like Ledge is what it is. I'm not gonna say it's bad, but it's just I find that like having that like Cavity, Nuthgrush, Grief influences it just feels so much better to me because that's like
mhm.
what Stomach is accomplishing right now. And it's like I kind of feel like Ledge was like the evolution. If you go from Weekend Nachos to Stomach, it's like Ledge is kind of in the middle there.
Cool.
Um and yeah, like vocal wise, like yeah, I'm happy to hear that Cavity comes across. I mean, literally, I actually think that you might even hear more Cavity in the first Stomach demo.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I mean, It's all in there. I love early Cavity. Like
Yeah.
it's just the hardcore influence, the hardcore punk influence. It's just like it's what separates a band like Grief or Noothgrush from like a band like Candlemass,
Yep.
who is like obviously a metal band. It's like you can hear. I mean, even Electric Wizard in a sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's way more metal influence, way more stoner metal influence, and then you get a band like Grief or Noothgrush, and you can hear it's almost like, I mean, it quite literally is just crust punks playing doom, basically. So yeah, I mean,
I mean, but look where the members from Grief came from.
exactly,
They came from power violence, hardcore grind bands. Like that's what
exactly.
that's what they did. So no, that's awesome. Uh, I want to talk about the tones and the texture kind of on the record as well too. I feel like it was very thought out. Uh, how each song was arranged and kind of how the album begins and ends. It almost feel like there's this is not to over exaggerate, but I think it's just a good way to do it. It's almost like it starts out with like a throbbing pain and then ends with this like guttural torment. Like that's almost like the way the record, like, and it goes throughout the cycles of more and more mental breakdown and pain as it goes along, to where as it gets to the end, it almost feels like if I don't finish this last song, I'm gonna die anyway. So I might as well get this last song out. Like, so if you can kind of talk to me how you were like how you actually arranged it, the thought processes on doing, and then there's a couple songs in particular that I want to talk about. But if you can kind of go from there.
Yeah, dude, I'm loving every second of this because I do put a lot of thought into Stomach, and like it seems like it's being appreciated fully by you. So I that's great. I appreciate it. Yeah, I feel like I've been a lot more creative with this project than I have in previous works because like like there was plenty of thought that's gone into like Ledge or Weekend Nachos, but like
Mhm.
at the same time, the goal with those bands was just to get people to mosh. You know, I don't think I could care less if anyone moved a muscle at a Stomach show.
Sure.
It's strictly art. So um all of the way, the ways that these songs are arranged is intentional.
Mhm.
And I think that like part of the reason I even chose the name Stomach and like some of it's a very torturous project.
Mhm.
Like a lot of the songs are intended to reflect like this vibe of pain and torture and just like more like internal, like almost like you've got like a stomach disease that's just like eating you inside. So yeah, right from the start, I would say like Crawl Space, the first track, I mean, it just kind of like hits you right away. Actually, the way that comes in, where it's just like dun,
Mhm.
dun, I kind of ripped that off of a Boris song,
Yep.
off of Pink. There's like a song in the middle of that record that kind of has this like really like dismal vibe, with like echoey drums, and like it's just like total sludge.
Yeah.
So I kind of just wanted to start out like very basic, very I think that there's moments in the record that are a little bit more upbeat, like the next track, Midnight in Pain. It kind of like ventures into more like Electric Wizard territory where it's a bit more like a bit more musical,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, the record like kind of begins and ends with just like this awful vibe, um, almost like you've got some sort of disease that's just like rotting you from the inside out. So yeah, I would say that if you got that vibe, then I'm glad it came across because it's like almost like a journey. Like it starts out like a kick to the gut, and then by the end, it's almost just like, oh God, like still dying here. You know, um,
Very cool. No,
so
that's great. No, perfect. So there's two songs in particular that I kind of want to talk about. And they're the two songs that I think that if people are fans of this music, listen to those two songs first, then listen to the album as a whole, and I think you'll get the magic of it. So the first one is Ocular Migraine. And the reason why I say that is, and again, not because you're here, not because anything like that, but like it may be the most perfect rendition of a late 90s, early 2000 sludge doom song that I've ever heard in my life. Like I almost feel like it's 20 years ago and like I'm listening to these bands for the very first time. And the reason why I say that is the drums are in the background and it kind of gives me this weird kind of spatial feeling, which the reason why those records had that is they all sucked at recording and they like had no engineers and they did it like on in rooms by themselves with like two microphones and like that was the magic of those kind of bands. And I feel like you encapsulated that with that song. Can you kind of talk about that song in general though? So
Yeah, I mean, so the when you mentioning the drums like that, I mean, like, I did my best to record this album like as primitive as I could. Just I actually went out and bought mics and like record. I mean, it is digital. It's not like I
mm-hmm.
recorded it straight to analog or anything, but I mean, I just used GarageBand, like I just straight up recorded the instrument. I mic'd all the amps, like none of that's like direct input or anything. Like it's all just me miking everything. And when you mention the drums, I always try to bury drums on
Mm-hmm.
on recordings so you can still hear them, but I try to make sure that they're not the focal point because I want it to kind of get that I want it to sound live
Mm-hmm.
in a way, and I want that like almost like okay, I'm seeing this band in the same type of environment that it was recorded in, which is like a shitty basement.
Yeah.
You know, like I didn't go to a studio for this. Like I recorded the shit in like this like terrible room that's next to my laundry room. So I kind of want that sound and vibe to come across. So I intentionally had the drums mixed a bit lower and threw some reverb on there just so it would kind of like bring the guitars out. And yeah, when you talk about Ocular Migraine, I think that song, it just has such a bleak, simple riff.
Mm-hmm.
But it also has like a song structure at the same time. It's got like a chorus, verse, bridge, chorus again, kind of formula to it.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so that combined with like the simplicity of it, I think kind of comes across like that vibe that you mentioned.
Yeah.
It gives you a fresh take on the genre,
Yeah.
you know. Um,
Absolutely.
So that combined with like the way it's recorded, I think it just kind of makes that track stand out.
Cool. And then the other song is Bathwater. And the reason why I want to talk about Bathwater is it gives me this 1930s old blues man kind of vibe, like if he was in a doom metal band. Like I almost like hear, and I know they're not there, but I almost hear like old school lap steel guitars in it, like just the way it's presented. It's the bluesiest doom song that I've heard in quite some time. So I like, and I think it's interesting because it doesn't sound like any other song on the record to me. So,
Yep.
like I said, it's the one standout standalone track. So, if you could kind of talk about that one too, I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a favorite of mine. When I was recording that, I was like thinking in my like, I don't consider myself like a egotistical person or
Mhm.
anything, but when I was recording that, I'm just like, man, this is gonna sound fucking insane. Like I was thinking like this is the track. Like
Yeah.
anybody that's like really looking for something that's just gonna put you in a dark place, like this is the track, right? That song, if you notice, like it's all just guitars ringing out for
Yeah.
like almost the first entire half of the song. And it's like the bass line is what drives it, you know? So like when you say it's bluesy, it's like, when I think of bluesy, I think of like guitars driving the song, but at the same time, it doesn't need to because when I
Right.
think of blues, I think of like one general idea continuously going
Yep.
where you can do a lot with that and like, but it's really like nothing's changing in that song, you know? It's just drony guitars kind of ringing out, but like the riff is all on the bass and it just continues that way until it takes a really crazy turn at
Yeah.
the end. And then it just becomes like straight earth worship after that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like it goes into this final part where the guitars actually come in for the very first time. The rest of the guitars are just feeding back the whole song. And then all of a sudden you go into this drone riff that really kind of, I think there's like still like 4 more minutes of it
Yeah,
after
yeah.
this. But yeah, the song is like 2 parts. It's like that. But yeah, when you mention blues, it's like that makes sense because like blues is just one general
Yeah.
guitar line that's like driving the whole song. And then whatever they do with that, with the vocals or anything else, it's kind of like that's what determines the vibe of the song. But you
Mhm.
have that like general riff kind of carrying you through the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, that that is one of the darkest songs I've ever written.
Nice.
Um, the lyrics to that song are that is a strictly like self-hating song. Like that song is I mean, you might be able to relate to this. I mean, I'm not 51, but I am 40, which if
Yeah.
you think about it, like 40 is not young in this scene,
No.
so it's like I'm getting there. That song is strictly about getting older and like kind of like being at odds with like where you're at in life,
Mhm.
um, being at odds with like how you feel you look like physically, just kind of like purely like, disgust with like a lot of things about yourself and like bathwater, the line, there's no actual, I don't think that I even say bathwater in the song, but I do say at the end, I say, um, what do I say? To the sewer goes pride. Um, and it's just the vibe of that is like dirt, like dirty bathwater. Like
Mhm.
you're cleansing yourself and like your pride is just going down the drain as you get older, basically. So
Nice. Yeah. You can feel it. You can feel it in
yeah.
the track. Cool. So I'm just gonna straight out ask, what the hell is going on with that cover, my friend? Like, I have looked at this album cover like 14, 20, 50 times now, and I can't make head. It looks like two cats holding each other. Like, that's literally what it reminds me of. But talk to me about this album cover and how does it fit in your mind to the music?
Okay. So that image is something I've had for quite some time. I don't remember exactly what I was searching for when I found it, but I found it on the internet, and it's a picture of somebody in a parka,
Mhm.
and he's actually slitting a husky's throat.
Oh,
So that's what the picture is, and um, yeah, I just thought it was like such a brutal image. Just like I actually fucked with it a little bit because the
uh-huh.
the image originally was like a little bit more like decipherable, so I kind of messed with it, made it a bit more grainy. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm guessing you would agree that it's just a very like unsettling
Yeah,
image,
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what it is. It's you kind of look if you look at it and you don't know that he's killing the dog, it looks like he's hugging the dog.
Mhm.
Which I'm fine with people seeing that, whatever. But yeah, if you look really closely, you can see that he's actually harming the animal. Um, I just like brutal shit.
Yeah.
I think that so Parasite is actually there's no song on the record called Parasite, but
Mhm.
I do say Parasite in the first song in the lyrics. Um, and that song is about like domestic violence,
Mm.
basically. So the song kind of has like not a positive message, but like one of like moral fiber at the beginning. Like the song is like condemning anyone that would like essentially hurt their family. Um, and so Parasite, I kind of feel like it fits with like somebody like slitting an animal's throat. Like
Mhm.
when I think parasite, I think of somebody that's like harmful, or anything that's harmful, any being that is harmful is a parasite. And it almost goes with like the stomach theme too, where like
Sure.
you get something that's like eating you on the inside out. But yeah, like any image that suggests like violence or something harmful, I think kind of goes with that album title. So um, yeah, I felt like it was a good fit.
Cool. So let's talk about the actual release, the LP itself, the vinyl version of it. I haven't seen it yet. I did order it, so it is coming my way. But like I said, talk to me about Hibernation and how that all came about. And are you happy with the way things are going now that the record's been out for a little bit? Like I know not long, but a little bit. What
Uh,
kind of feedback are you seeing?
so I'm extremely happy so far. It seems like people really like the record. I mean, like just your positive thoughts on it, like just really makes me feel good, because I this is my favorite project I've ever done. It's like the what I put myself into the most. It's my most pride and joy, has gone into this. Despite how miserable the content is. But yeah, I'm really happy with how it's been received. So Hibernation Release is the name of the label. And the dude that runs it, his name is Cameron, and he's just this dude that has just stood by my music for like years now,
Nice.
even before Stomach. And when I asked him if he wanted to do the record and he said yes, I was just like, this is perfect, it's not like a very big label,
Mhm.
it's like pretty underground, but he gets his shit out there, he's made a name for himself. um I like to work with friends, and I like to work with people who I know support me as much as I might support them, so uh he did an amazing job with the record, like I knew he would. um and yeah, so far it's been received really well. I hope that the pressing, because we did 300 of them. I hope that first pressing sells out at some point.
Mhm.
Like I would like to not sit on the pressing. Um, but yeah, I think we have plans to like work together on another full length. I've already got most of it written, so
Nice.
yeah, it's been great working with Hibernation Release.
Very cool. Very cool. So again, now that you had some time between recording it, getting the release out, is there anything that you would change now that you've had some time to be able to think about the record?
It's funny you ask that, because there's a specific thing that I would change. And that is, it's kind of nitpicky, but I don't know if it bothers anybody else but me. I'm hoping it doesn't.
Okay.
I would love for nobody to be bothered by this but me. But the last song, Stomach, fades out way too quickly
Okay.
at the end. I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, like my mixing and mastering guy did exactly what I told him to do, like no shot at him whatsoever. He did perfect. But for whatever reason, in the notes to him, I said that I wanted a 5-second fade out for that end, the
Mhm.
the end of that. And honestly, it should be more like 15 to 20 seconds. It just, if you listen to it closely, the end of that record, it just ends way too quickly for that type of song.
Sure.
Um, and it shouldn't be over so fast like that. Like it it it's not like it just cuts off. Like there is a fade, but it doesn't have, like, the end of the record doesn't have the vibe that I want it to.
Gotcha.
And that's just something I would change. It's like it's actually really kills me that this happened. And it's nobody's fault but mine. I just kind of like, when I was like approving the final master, like it's just I didn't notice it at the time. And then once it was like going off to press, I like listened to it again and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like,
Oh,
so yeah, that's one thing. To be honest, I don't think there's anything else I would change. I might have a little bit more kick drum in the mix. Just a little bit. I intentionally buried the drums in a way,
mhm.
like I said earlier, but specifically I don't like when the kick drum is like too loud on a recording. Um, because I think it gives it almost like this like Pantera feel to it.
Mhm.
Um, and I try to get away with that when like I don't like really well produced metal too much. I like for it to sound kind of like shit, like
Mhm.
Newthgrush, um, and Cavity, like Newthgrush and Cavity. I mean, actually, Cavity recordings kind of sounded better as they went along.
Yeah.
Um, but like early Cavity and like pretty much all Newthgrush just sounds like fucking shit, and that's like how I want my sludge.
But that's part of the magic of this sound. Literally it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's beautiful. It's there's when I say sounds, see, a normal person wouldn't understand, but somebody that's like deranged would understand if I'm like, look, I just want it to sound like shit, you know? Um, yeah, so maybe a little more kick drum in the mix though, because I just kind of overdid the burying of it. I think it could go up a little more.
Cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. I don't hear anything wrong with the end of the record. So there you go. Okay. So
Thank you. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah. So I'll try and put your mind at ease at that. I do kind of want to talk about like there's not a lot of it, but there is some of that kind of like power violence blistering kind of moments that they fade in and fade out really quickly. It's not like that they're there much. So was that just a nod to what you've done over the years and you wanted to add a little bit of your old, old you into it? Or did you feel like that needed to be in the project?
So that's a good question. I do think it's just like this natural, like I really like grindcore and power violence, and I feel like there's so much brutality that comes in like a fast part that like it's like almost like I want that presence to still be in there at times. It's also kind of a nod to like a lot of like sludge bands in like the early 90s, like
Yep.
playing with power violence bands, like that scene, because if I were like 18 years old, I wouldn't have been around at all. But being 40, like I was a 90s kid, like
Yeah.
I was getting into this music in the 90s. So it's like I remember there just being like such an alliance with like, you know,
I saw tons of Slapaham bands playing with Doom bands. Like I literally saw like Dodgeball playing with Newthgrush and stuff like that. Like
yeah,
at the same, and you're like, and kids do, and I agree with you. So to me, not to cut you off, but like I was gonna say is like power violence grindcore is kind of like the ugly sister to doom metal. Like they're the opposite side of the same coin. That's kind of
yep,
the way I've always felt. So
totally. And
yeah.
like Spaz did a split on Bovine with
Yep.
Floor, which is like one of my favorite splits that's ever been released ever.
Yeah.
I love both sides of that record. And that's kind of like Floor even kind of got
Yeah.
more no idea records as they went along.
Yes, they did.
But like early Floor is just like some of the most deranged shit that you've ever heard,
Oh my god, that first Floor 7 inches, just like it's insanity, man. Like,
Yeah, it's like I know it's like truly fucking bizarre music.
yeah,
And like so yeah, there was that and like yeah, I just really, really wanted to like bring that out and like be that sludge band that you could listen to and still get that like power violence song. Honestly, I plan to do more of it.
ooh,
I always like having the option, and I think that the brutality is it's all there.
nice.
So
Um, how is Stomach gonna be different live than on record? Like, if I was to come see the project, how would what would I see differently than listening to the record?
well, I play drums and do vocals live. So for one, I mean, I don't know what people might be expecting if they listen to it, like if they're expecting like a standalone vocalist or someone that's maybe playing guitar
Hmm.
and doing vocals, but I am behind the drums while I do vocals. And then, you know, we're like always kind of evolving our live sound, like we're like adding like new, maybe like a bigger full stack or like, but honestly, like the the Behringer Super Fuzz pedal is what we use, which is the same pedal that Just Oborn uses on Dope Throne
Hmm.
and Electric Wizard. And that pedal takes care of so much of the tone live. So I will say that the feedback I've gotten so far of people that have seen us have said, like, it actually sounds like really loud and heavy live. So you guys are doing a good job. But I will say that, like, one thing that I could see maybe being an issue at some point is somebody just being like, well, they've only got one guitar. So there's going to be some aspects of the record missing live because it's like, how can you recreate something that you recorded like so carefully, you know, with that? But, I'm happy to say that everybody that's seen us so far has been like, yeah, the two-piece lineup is fucking sick.
Nice.
So I think that I will say this. I think that when anybody that comes to see us live they're gonna get that like that early 90s kind of like, yeah, this band isn't able to work with a whole lot, but they're playing anyways.
Very
As
cool.
opposed to like, maybe a more professional doom band that's been around forever, that's like, has like a lot of nice gear and is just, I think that people will get that kind of like vibe of like, oh yeah, these guys just showed up and played, you know,
Nice.
kind of like that old school, like, yeah, we're playing this random basement show. We're getting paid like $25 to do this. Like, who cares? You know, I think
Very
they'll kind
cool.
of get that vibe.
Very cool. Um, let's say you're in a record store. Back in the days, that's what I used to do because we used to buy music and not it wasn't all digital. But let's say you're in a record store and some kid picks up your record, all right, and you see him pick it up, and he looks at you and he says, "Hey, have you heard this before? What the hell does this sound like?" How would you explain your band to someone that's never heard it before?
Never heard it. Now, does this person like have literally no knowledge of like sludge at
No,
all?
no, no. They love this style of music. That's why
Okay,
they're like
gotcha,
they're underground kind of doom metal sludgy fans. So
gotcha. Okay. So I would kind of say a lot of the stuff we've said already,
okay,
but I'd be like it's just very early '90s sludge, um, really grief and Newthgrush, Toad Liquor type influence shit, like really, really bleak and nihilistic and miserable sounding. I think, and I would say, are you into that type of stuff? And they'll be like, yeah, I am. And I'll be like, you really like it. Check it out,
cool, very cool. Um, if there was anybody that you could collaborate with on your next record, who would it be and why?
Whoa, that's a great question. Let me actually think about that
Yeah,
um for a second.
yeah,
So there actually is a specific band slash person that I wanted to collaborate with. He happens to be a friend of mine. So are you familiar with that band Realize? The
no,
industrial. Okay. So there's a band called Realize, and they did their first few records on Relapse.
okay,
And it's like kind of God flesh
okay.
worship. It's like God flesh worship. And he's just got, yeah, I mean, you've heard God flesh. I
Oh
mean,
God, yeah,
there's a lot of like almost like Swans meets like maybe like a doom band, like almost influence,
Oh,
like
yeah, I call Swans. I mean, I call Godflesh industrial doom. That's basically what they are. So yeah,
yeah, totally. And there's like that vibe that it's just like super pissed off, like fucked up music. And this dude, his name is Kyle Kennedy, and he's from Tucson, Arizona.
okay.
And he does Realize it's like all his projects. Like he has like a band that he plays with live, but it's like all his stuff.
Hmm.
Um, he was actually in a power violence band called Sex Prisoner, who's also one of my favorite power violence bands of like recent times. But I would love to collaborate with him, and I would love to do a Realize Stomach collaboration.
Nice.
Um, and the reason being that like I think that could sound really cool and fucked up, and also I really respect the way that this dude like writes music, and it's kind of similar to me where it's like he's got his own world and like he's got all these ideas and he makes them happen. Um, so yeah, Realize Stomach collaboration. If that can happen someday, that would be awesome.
Very cool. Very cool. Um, if there was one band that you could tour with, like the dream tour, it doesn't matter if they exist now or not. Like if you could just, even if you could bring them back, like who would you want to tour with?
Grief.
Okay.
A, a few others come to mind though, like touring with Electric Wizard would be incredible.
Oh,
I mean, Electric Wizard is one of the biggest influences of this band. I don't know how much I would enjoy touring with I Hate God just because like those dudes are maniacs.
yeah.
And I'm like just a very like laid back, like I mean, not to say those dudes aren't, but like I don't party. I don't like to hang out. Like I'll get some food and
Yeah.
sleep on tour. So yeah, I mean, touring with I Hate God, I think those shows would be awesome though. And yeah, I honestly, if I could tour with Sun or Earth, like that would also be like a dream. I would love to go on tour with those bands too and just like expose Stomach to those audiences.
It'd be really awesome if you did it with like Earth Now, where they're kind of a post rock kind of band with those doomy elements. I think
Yeah,
you'd shock the hell out of like a lot of people there. That would be cool as hell. Um,
totally.
Yeah, so there was one band in particular I was going to bring up, and that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it. I don't even know if you know them, if you like them, but like you give me the same kind of chaotic vibe as Buzz Oven, and I always thought like you touring with like every time I met Kirk, it was more of a strange adventure. Like that guy was just like he literally I don't know if you know the story of his life, but he like lived in a cave in North Carolina for like almost 5 years. Like he refused to live in a home. Like he literally put all his stuff in a cave
Is
in the
that the
mountains.
vocalist of Buzz Oven?
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, my understanding of, first of all, I love that band.
yeah.
I love that Soar record. And
Oh,
what's the other, there's another Buzz Oven record that's, I forget the name of it, but there's another Buzz Oven record that I really like too. And I think
mhm.
it's like either the record before or the record after Soar.
Okay.
But regardless, love that band. They're kind of like, I always thought of Buzz Oven as kind of like the less accessible I Hate God
Yeah.
sort of. Like still like drug induced mania, like just total grimy, but yeah, my understanding of that band has always been that they're like an East Coast band that
Yeah.
like are just kind of like fucked up maniacs themselves,
Yeah.
so I didn't know that about the dude in the cave though.
Yeah. Yeah, for
um
like 5 years he lived in a cave. He refused to live in a house and he like refused to be on the grid, off grid. But it was all I just think it would be like an amazing tour. I know he doesn't do a lot of shows anymore, but like I think it would be just be phenomenal to see. Just because those like every time I've seen him live, it's one of the most like amazing. Like you don't think they're gonna make it through the show. Like literally, you don't think they're gonna live. Like that's how crazy it is. So
That sounds incredible.
yeah,
I love that band. I just that band is like, so I mean, I think we both obviously like fucked up music,
yeah, 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 yeah.
Like Buzz Oven is just like a great example of a band that is extremely good. Like they're extremely good and talented musicians, but they're just like they clearly fucking despise themselves,
Right.
like, which is that's all I want in a band, So
Cool. No, that's awesome. So what I'm going to do is kind of wrap it up here and say thank you very much for doing this and taking the time later tonight to to be able to do it. But why don't you tell the people that are watching this, as I always say, my hundreds and hundreds of viewers, because much like you're a small band, I'm a small little podcast. But why don't you tell us what the next 3 months have to offer for Stomach? Like what's going on?
that's a great question. Actually, this is right around the time when I'm kind of wrapping up the final writing of my next record. And over the next, probably specifically 3 months, now that you mention it, I am probably going to be tracking that album. And recording for me is like a very slow process because I got a full-time job,
Yeah.
daughter, like it, playing loud music in my house doesn't exactly fit our
Right.
day's activities. So, it's really got to happen only sometimes. So it's going to take me a while, but I've got almost an entire full length written now, and I will be working on that, and I'll be recording an additional 2 songs to do a split with this band called Northless.
Okay.
Uh, and yeah, the next 3 months are going to be focused on kind of tracking that album and getting it ready to go and hopefully see release within the next year or two.
Cool. Well, again, John, absolute pleasure. Thank you for doing this with me. Clint from the Doorway too. Hanging out with John. He's of Stomach. If you can't realize by now, like I love the band. I love the record. I'm so glad we got to do this. And if you ever do come to Texas, let me know because like I will absolutely come see you. Like that is 100% a fact. So
Sounds good, man. Thank you so much. And please keep in touch. I really appreciate you letting me do this.
oh, absolutely, man. You have a great day.
All right, later, man.
Bye.